Welcome to Story in a Bottle. I'm your host, Dan Maccarone. Each episode, our guests are leading voices in tech, media, and entertainment. And to get to know them better, we share their favorite cocktails as they share their stories.
When Tristan Snell walked into the New York Attorney General's office, he was almost immediately handed the case against Trump University, which kicked off a career that's always been determined to overcome huge hurdles for important wins. Over a pint of foam heavy water stout and some Michter's toasted rye, Tristan talks about that first case and his book, Taking Down Trump, how COVID finally ended his foray into the startup world, and how those early days of the NYAG's office have shaped his approach to politics and law today.
Together. Hey, cheers.
Cheers.
You already did start drinking.
Yeah, no, I know. Sorry.
No, I think that means you're doing the podcast right if you're already ahead of the game. But we are drinking beer. We're drinking, and by the way, just so you know, and I told you before, I don't drink a lot of beer, even though we are drinking beer at a craft beer bar.
You're like the most interesting guy in the world. You don't often drink beer, but
except it's not Dos Equis when I drink.
yeah, it's not. It's also not Dos Equis. Yeah.
What are we drinking? We're drinking foam.
We're drinking foam.
Yes, from Heavy Water from Vermont. So it's apparently very good. But this is pretty good. So thanks for picking it.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming by.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I feel like it's a long time coming.
It has been.
We've been through some things together.
Yes, we have. That's true.
Most of them good.
Most of them good.
But let's not where we're at today. So you have a book coming out, Taking Down Trump.
Yep.
Which I am very curious to hear, and I'm sure that this will kind of delve into some of the other stuff we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But let's start with that. Like, what kind of inspired you to write this book? What's the elevator pitch for it?
So the thought that I had was there's a lot about the Trump University stories. And I'll take a step back. So I spent 3 years at the New York Attorney General's office, during which I was lucky enough to get the chance to lead our investigation and prosecution of Trump University. That experience, which then that resulted in the $25 million settlement that happened in 2016, went final in 2017. Most of the victims of that scam got their money back as a result. Before that, there had been virtually no major legal victories against Trump. Since then, the New York AG's office then successfully went after and shut down the Trump Foundation, got some money back out of that, got a good, settlement result there. The Trump Foundation case happened. The AG's office there got a really good result. Now there's been more and more and more of these lawsuits and prosecutions that are trying to finally bring Trump to justice. The thought that I had was, what can we learn from my experiences as well as my analysis of a lot of these other cases to come up with kind of the playbook for how to beat Trump and be able to analyze, okay, here's what he does. Here are all the things that he does to avoid getting nailed for anything. And he's been able to float above the law. What can we do to fight back, whether that's being a prosecutor in one of these offices or as a citizen?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Because a lot of times, one of the biggest problems is what I would sort of think of as the political timidity of some of our elected prosecutors and some of our appointed prosecutors too, where it's about whether or not they've got the courage to go after him. It's not just about whether or not you've got the legal merits, whether you've got the evidence.
Right.
Also, do you have that courage? Do you have the chutzpah? Do you have the balls to actually go after him?
What is it about Trump that people are so afraid to go after him? What is that all about?
Yeah. So look, I think the thing is that he successfully channels a certain amount of aggression and just sort of virulent, antisocial behavior at being able to scare opponents into not even going after him. His playbook fundamentally hinges on, I'd say, it's sort of, scare tactics and delay tactics are really like the two biggest things. And then probably number 3 would be like, playing to the crowd, that he has his constituency and he's going to play to it. This is not a playbook that's necessarily unique to him, and he didn't really come up with it. As I identify in the book, I really think the DNA for that is from, I think that's from Roy Cohn. who was his first lawyer back in the 70s and 80s.
He was a beast. Like
Cohn was, absolutely infamous, notorious, and just a extremely aggressive and just awful person to deal with.
Yeah.
He was really the sort of boiling cauldron of hate at the middle of all the McCarthyism witch hunts.
Yeah.
He was the lawyer. He was the lead lawyer for McCarthy back in the 50s. Then he did a lot of other work for a lot of other people, but including a bunch of the five families here in New York to defend them from eventually getting taken down. Cohn died in the 80s, so he didn't live to see his mob clients get taken down.
Right.
Ultimately, they were, but the playbook there really came from Cohn. Trump started working with Cohn in the early 70s. The very first case that he was, accused of wrongdoing with was in 1973. The Fair Housing Administration went after Trump and his dad for discriminating against blacks in renting apartments in Queens and Brooklyn, because that was their sort of original set of properties for all apartment buildings in Queens and Brooklyn. You'd have a complex of like 35,000 units, and there would be like 5 black tenants.
Right.
In Brooklyn.
Right.
Suffice it to say that the population of Brooklyn is not 5 out of 35,000 black people.
Especially in the 70s.
Right. And so it's, to say, what Cohn did in that situation was, and then Trump sort of followed on and did this himself in the future, was they turned around and sued the federal government for a $100 million lawsuit that was completely baseless. But then they went and personally attacked the lead prosecutor for the government, did all these harangues in front of the judge, so forth and so on. And they got the government to effectively just give him a slap on the wrist.
I mean, these tactics are legitimate what he's doing now.
That is pretty much what he's doing now. So he learned it then when he was in his 20s and he was working with Cohn, and it's really Cohn's playbook. Cohn that also, by the way, gave it to, that playbook is the same playbook that a lot of the mob guys used, most famously John Gotti.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about that in the book as well, because I think that's an interesting thing to point to, that you can kind of tease out what are the sources of where all of these scare and delay and sort of, crowd baiting tactics, where do they come from? It's that. But like, the people didn't want to go up against that. And especially as Trump began being able to generate more and more publicity for himself,
Yeah.
to be able to snap his fingers and get, at first it was just the New York media, then later it was the national media, where he can get media attention whenever the heck he wants. Now he can just go circumvent all of that, put something up on Truth Social, and everybody's going to hear what he has to say. People just don't want to go up against that.
Right.
The kicker is that people don't want to go up against that hate machine. They don't want to get attacked. But I think what's happened in the last, 5-8 years or so is that now people have now realized you can go up against him and win. The fact that we shown what to do,
Mm-hmm.
and by we, I sort of say the New York AG's office, and they're doing it again in the case right now,
Yeah.
in the civil fraud case that's going on here in New York. But the playbook that the AG's office developed is what they're still using, and now everybody's using it one way or another, even if they don't, consciously realize it. But I think the fact that more people have been willing to go up against him is in large part because now it's been proven it can be done.
Makes sense. And so the book really outlines that playbook that you guys do.
Yeah, this is a horrible elevator pitch. It's a very, very long elevator. But yeah, the elevator pitch is, it's a playbook with the 12 rules, with the secrets for how to bring Donald Trump to justice. That's the whole thing. And I wanted to share that at a moment when I think we all need to hear it. I want to provide everybody with some realistic hope, but grounded in realism, that there is a way to bring him down. Because I think a lot of people still believe, even the people who want to see him brought down, believe it can't be done. And I wanted to be able to say, no, it can be done. Here's how.
All right, so one more question about the book, and I don't know, I have a lot of other stuff to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with the book itself in terms of the content, but
Sure.
How did you find the experience of writing a book? Because this is your first book, right?
This is my first book.
So walk me through.
But I found the experience to be, the writing was far and away the best part. So I love writing.
Okay.
And writing this book was actually pretty, you know, I'm not going to say easy because it's never easy, but it flowed really, really well.
Oh, cool.
You know, there's the old advice about like, write what you know, especially when it's your first book, write what you know. I know this. So this was like this was about as write what you know as you can get.
Yeah, sure.
And so it made it really straightforward to get the thoughts out and get them going. All of the other parts of it, the figuring out the publisher, and getting all of that figured out, and that was really a matchmaking thing. And I think I found a really good match in Melville because they do a lot of sort of pro-democracy books.
Yeah.
And they're also known for being able to get books out quickly to meet the news cycle. They've done that a bunch in recent years. So that's been a good pairing. But it took time to make that match. And then the publicity is not bad. It's just a lot of work and it's not as enjoyable as the writing. So the writing, I mean, for me, I adopted a model of, I like the idea that you write at the same time every day. Get into a good ritual, get into a good habit. It's what a lot of writers do.
Yeah.
Try to adopt those best practices. So I wrote in the mornings.
Yeah, that's what a lot of writers do. Yeah.
Because when the rest of the day comes and eats all of your other plans and ideas, what was the thing that you at least got done in the morning? So I just tried to have writing be that thing. So I would get cranking on my writing for the book. I would actually start as early as 7 a.m, and have most of it be done by like 10 or 11 or 12 for the day. And it went really quickly.
There's only so much time I think you have and energy in your body to write.
You can't do more than I would say 3 hours a day is probably about right. I was getting away with doing 4 or 5, but as I was doing that, I was a little bit worried that I was pushing it too hard and that I would tap out too quickly. I got away with it. I think partly because this was a relatively short book.
Oh, it's okay.
So it's only, I mean, it's still, there's a lot of meat to it, but this wasn't like, oh, it's a 400 or 500 page book. It's a 200-page book, which is great, but it meant that I was able to kind of do it in a series of sprints.
Yep.
And I was able to get it done. I don't think you can do 5 hours. I don't think you can write a 500-page book 5 hours a day. I think you'd be,
no, I mean,
unless you're going to do the Jack Kerouac thing and just take like a whole bunch of drugs for 6 weeks and then but the kicker there though is that then he had spent 3 years preparing that 6-week sprint. And then he spent another like 3 or 5 years editing.
That's right. Yeah.
So yes, he wrote the first draft of On the Road in 6 weeks with a lot of Benzedrine, but that's actually not when most of the work happened.
That's right. Yeah. So
and I didn't do that here.
Did you do yours in 6 weeks?
No. I think I probably did it in a series of like 1 to 2 week sprints.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm sure we're going to get to software.
Yeah. Just skip through that part. Yeah. And no, totally great. Well, I want to so whenever I talk to people about they do these interesting projects, and have had really kind of fascinating careers. I think that always that I kind of like to go back to is to understand where did this come from? You're very, I've known you for about 10 years now. You're maybe a little bit less, but about that.
Yeah, you're right.
And you're very ambitious and you have big visions, and I always appreciate people like that. Because I feel like I share a kindred spirit that way sometimes. But I want to go back to so I don't know where this comes from for you. I know that you moved around a bit as a kid. You kind of spent some time in the Northeast. You spent some time in the
South.
In the South.
Yeah.
Yep. So walk me through that experience. What was that family experience like growing up? Brothers, sisters? What did your parents do?
Yeah. So we moved around a good bit. People would ask me if my parents were in the military. No, my dad did IT. He was
IT in the 80s.
He was he did what we would now call fintech, but they didn't call it that back then. So he did dev work for the finance industry, and basically building all of the back end software and front end stuff for as banking got more computerized. So that was a growing industry, and it meant that he did some job hopping. So we moved around a bit. I mean, I was born in Dallas, and then
you're a Cowboys fan, right?
Yes, if we had to talk about that,
We don't have to talk about it. I don't like you have like different loyalties to different sports teams.
Yeah, as a result, I have a very weird set of sports loyalties because I've moved around a lot. But once I get one, they tend to stick and be super intense. But anyhow, Dallas, then Ohio for a year outside of Cleveland.
Okay.
Then kind of the Maryland suburbs of D.C., the Virginia suburbs of D.C., and then kind of the Virginia exurbs of D.C. out toward the Blue Ridge. So I went to high school in a small town called Purcellville, which is about 50 miles from D.C., but way closer to West Virginia than to D.C.
Did the proximity to DC at all like impact your interest in government, or was it just it happened to be
That's a good question. I wouldn't say
that's a superficial question too.
I'm sorry. No, I would say I think it probably had some marginal impact, but I think that even if I had grown up in Alaska or Kansas or wherever else, it would have still been there. I think that I have long been drawn to politics and to law.
Was that something in your high school or even before that? Like,
oh yeah,
like where, like when I was a kid, I remember I think it was my junior year of high school was the Clinton Bush Ross Perot election. Yeah, that's like my first like really intense. I don't want education, but I feel like feeling that passion for politics and that passion for like, oh, I really don't like this person. I really want this person or whatever. Like, when did that start for you?
I mean, I think I was probably 6 or 7.
Okay. I
mean, it was pretty early. It also was part and parcel with a really strong love of history, which I've maintained to the present day. So yeah, anything having to do with history, politics, government, law, I got really into really early, and it stayed with me. So, yeah, I was a total, I mean, there are lots of different types of nerd. And that I was that nerd early on. Like that was definitely.
What does that involve? What does that involve or entail?
That means being like, if you want to look up like that sort of like government and politics nerd, government politics history nerd.
Yeah.
There would be a picture of the Leslie Knope character in Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
It's her.
And
she's that.
And are you that person?
Yes.
You're Leslie Knope.
Yeah. Like that's, I mean, not exactly, but it's that flavor of like, I'm also a big sports nerd.
Sure. Sure.
I'm a bit of a Star Wars nerd. Like there's other nerds that
you can have multiple nerd hats.
You can have multiple nerd hats. It's okay. But I would say that the kind of history, politics, like I'm a total nerd about American history. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Were you like running for like any student council?
Oh yeah, as soon as I could. So when I was in, I think it was 3rd grade, it was I think the first year in which they said, okay, you're going to have a class rep, and you can be in the student council for the elementary school. And I think I was elected my class's rep in large part so that I would shut up about wanting to be the class's rep. Then
That's a good way to do it.
To show up at the first council, the first like the SGA, the Student Government Association, showed up at like the first SGA meeting, and then they wanted to, then from the class reps, they wanted to elect like the officers for the whole school for the year. I proceeded to run for each office. All of them. I wanted to run. I ran for president. I lost. I ran for VP. I lost. I ran for treasurer.
I'm going to get there.
I'm going to get there. I ran for secretary. I lost. I ran for treasurer. I lost. And I was sad. I was very sad. And then I think that the teachers took pity on me. They could tell that I was sad. And they said, you know what? You can be assistant treasurer.
Oh, assistant treasurer.
Yeah. Skip ahead to in high school, I did end up being student body president.
Of course you did. They see, went from assistant treasurer to student body president. Quite a trajectory.
So yeah, just wow, what a career jump.
As a junior. That's actually really impressive. I admire your perseverance. After one loss, I would have been like, and I ran for student body vice president of my 7th grade.
Okay.
With the very patriotic slogan in stick a feather in your cap and vote for Maccarone.
Of course, and I mean, you should, man. You should go in.
And I'm going to tell you something right now. I didn't just lose.
You lost bigly.
I lost bigly.
You lost bigly.
What led you to Princeton? Let's get to that.
I mean,
it's a okay school.
It's an okay school. You know, it has its okay points. I really, you know, it has great programs in like politics and history and government. It also has a really great creative writing program. And by then, like by the time I was like 17, 18, I had started writing and loved it. And so it was the combo of kind of those things, I think, that led me there. And I liked the fact that it wasn't a giant school. It was, and the fact that it felt, you know, for a really nerdy school, it felt so it had like a social life.
Yeah.
So those things were all very appealing to me.
And I think that the thing about Princeton that I haven't spent a lot of time there, but unlike like other Ivies that are like in smack dab in the middle of huge cities like Cambridge or New Haven or Philadelphia, whatever, like it's in its own little town, kind of like Dartmouth or whatever. Maybe not as bad.
It honestly, it's sort of a miniaturized. There's a part of Princeton that you wouldn't expect, which is that it's a bit of a miniaturized version of like a state school, in that it has a lot of school spirit. They care a lot about their sports teams. And Princeton sort of has a little bit of a college town vibe. Yeah, it's its own little bubble. You know, it's all about like the coffee shops and the ice cream shops and, you know, and stuff like that.
So did you know going into college freshman year that your ultimate track was to go to law school?
I think that if you had asked me at the beginning of college, was I going to go to law school, I probably would have said yes. I went through some phases in college where I thought I might do something else. Although that said, there was a great degree to which there's a degree to which I went to law school because I felt like it was the thing to do for me to go do things in public life and to really be in there in the arena, you know, to overuse the overused Teddy Roosevelt thing. But there's also a degree to which I probably kind of went by default.
But I mean, so I know that you got to have the experience like of interning at the White House and even working on the Gore Lieberman campaign. Like, what was that more of a push to even further to get you into public life, or were there parts of that you looked at and you're like, oh fuck no?
Especially both.
Well, I mean, when you were in the working at the White House, you were there 98 to 2000.
Oh, and I was there. So I was there only for the summer of 98. I was there for 2 months.
So before all the shit.
No. I was there during the peak of that.
Oh, fun.
Yes. So I was there in July and August of 1998, and that was the summer that the Lewinsky scandal boiled over.
Okay.
So I was there the day that Bill Clinton got deposed.
Oh.
And it was just wall to wall media attention.
Yeah.
And I was.
Is that the depending on what the word is deposition?
I don't know if it's that. I don't know if that was the deposition where he said that or not. Actually, I would have to go. I used to know that, you know, chapter and verse. Would have to go back and look now. But I was working in the White House Office of Communications. So that is basically. The White House press office are the ones that stand in front of the podium and answer questions from reporters in front of cameras. The White House communications office are the ones where when you read something in the papers, you know, or you hear something on TV or whatever, where it's a source close to the president said, or a White House aide said, that's probably coming from the White House Office of Communications. Somewhat appropriately, at least in those years, they were in the basement of the West Wing. The press office was right above us. So they were the public-facing ones, and we were the ones that were sort of lurking down in the basement, working the phones, talking to a bunch of media people.
Like in picture this from the West Wing.
Right. So, yeah. Right. A bit. So, and I was and there's only one intern. Most of those West Wing offices have very, very few interns because there's not enough desk space. Right. Because it's such a premium. It's not a very big space, the West Wing. So if you're, so a lot of those offices only have 1 or 2 interns total. Most of the White House interns work, as most of the White House staffers do, across the street in the old executive office building. I think now it's called the Eisenhower Executive Office Building. If anybody's ever watched Veep, they do a great job of having the B-roll of like cutting to that gray building across the street. And that is, in fact, actually where the Veep White House office is. And there, it sort of signifies the really at the center of power of Selena and her team. I absolutely adore that show.
I hear it more close to reality than anyone.
Was I the one who told you that, though?
It may have been. I don't know. Maybe more than one person has told me this.
I will happily debate this, but my feeling is that of all of the different depictions of the White House, sort of serious and comic, Veep actually comes closer to reality. Obviously, it's not exactly like that. They turn the comedy dials all the way up and raise the absurdity levels, but it actually comes closer in many, many respects to what official Washington actually feels.
Well, the more that we watch what's going on in government right now, it's definitely closer to being like, this could be.
Yeah, so we were down in the basement, and I'm the one actually answering the phone for that office for a couple of those senior White House staffers. So I'm getting then calls from like the day of the deposition. I get this call, and I'm not going to try to attempt to do the impression because it'll fail miserably. But I get the call. I pick up the phone. And it's like, man, please pick the so and so. And it's like, this is definitely Tom. He didn't even need to say this is Tom Brokaw.
That's pretty cool.
But, it was a lot. Yeah, it was a lot of phone calls and making copies and stuff. Very unsexy intern work, but it was really cool to do it in that setting and see what all of that looked like firsthand. It was
any other things stick out in your mind from that time that are anecdotally kind of, I guess, useful to you in your political life, or things that you were like, oh, that's a great thing, or that's a terrible thing?
I mean, and then there was the Gore campaign too, which was its own thing. So, I mean, for that, I was in Nashville at headquarters. I did not stay all the way to election night because I started my first year of law school that fall. So I was there from June to August in Nashville. I could see a lot of the things that were not going the right way on that. So I think that was probably in terms of...
Were you using that way?
Or a lot of us were just like, oh shit.
Yeah.
This is not good. This is not going well. And you could tell that some of these outside DC consultants had too much sway with the campaign. You could tell, like, they would come in and they would just sort of lord it over everybody as they came in. We were down in Nashville supposedly to get us out of the DC bubble. Like, that's why they had... Gore started the campaign out of an office on K Street in Washington. K Street, for those who don't know, DC is sort of renowned as, or notorious for being the place where a lot of the lobbyists have their offices. So to have an office on K Street in DC, to have that be the address was kind of a bad signal. And somewhere along the line, somebody said, hey, we should change this. And they moved the office down to Nashville. Gore, we've probably all forgotten, is from Tennessee.
Yeah.
And he was a very, very popular House rep and senator from the great state of Tennessee for many, many years. And then, of course, he was Bill Clinton's VP and then ran for president in 2000. But the thing is, like, we were down there to be sort of like away from DC, away from the bubble, away from the Beltway, sort of be out there in America. We weren't in Merca. We were in an office park that we in space in an office park that we never left. Nobody ever left that space. We weren't really in Nashville, so to speak. We were in our own different bubble, just relocated down there.
Right.
My take was, and that every day, everything would stop. Back in those days, the show for sort of like, oh, we're going to talk politics was, I might have this wrong, but I think this is right. I think it was that Wolf Blitzer hosted what was then called Inside Politics on CNN, and it aired at 4 o'clock Central, I think. I may have some of these details wrong, but whatever time it was, whether it was 4 or 5 or whatever, everything in the office, at least I worked in strategic operations. So we were doing a lot, there was research and strat ops. So we were doing a lot of like research into, issues. We were doing research into things regarding Gore and his sort of policies and things that he had championed over the years, his record, but also then we did have some opposition research stuff that we did. And we worked very closely with like the press folks, the communications folks, and the people that were really kind of running the campaign.
Yeah.
But everything would stop every day, especially when some of these consultant folks were in town. And we would stop and watch TV to see if we had won the cycle that day. And the thing that I said at the time, and then I've repeated it many times since then, was that if we had simply taken that same hour every day and gone to a barbecue spot around, just gone and gotten something to eat in Nashville at that same hour a day, we just gone to frickin' Sonic and like hung out and chatted people up, we would have won.
Wow.
I think we would have, because we needed to stop listening to the echo chamber and actually understand what people in Nashville, which is now it's much more of a Democratic town. Back then it was, weirdly, I would say, like, Nashville has become more Democratic. The rest of Tennessee has gotten redder.
Very, very red.
Back then there were a lot of blue rural counties. And Nashville was more moderately blue. But we could have won Tennessee. I think we only lost it by like 5 points or something like that. We could have won it if we tried harder.
Well, I think the insight from that, that will...
Clinton carried it twice.
Did, yeah. The insight from that to me is that, which we'll get to later, is how we look at public perception or so how we listen to the public or the people when it comes to things, whether it be in the world of startups or the world of politics, like, versus listening to the machine of consultants that often tell you things that are not based on reality.
That's right.
And so I'll come back to that in a second. So I know that you went to law school. You didn't immediately go from UVA to the New York Attorney General. You had a little of a corporate law experience in Boston.
Right.
It wasn't a tremendously long experience there, but
I mean, it was, I did like 6 something years in sort of the big law firm world.
Yeah.
And that was the Boston and a bit of DC. And those were, especially as I got a little more senior there, those were some really great experiences where I just learned from some really terrific lawyers and worked on some really great teams with awesome paralegals, awesome assistants who just really knew how to get stuff done. And the stuff that we did was just amazing. Like we had one team where we got the first court-ordered release of detainees from Guantanamo. We had another team that won what was at the time the biggest patent litigation in American history. It was pretty awesome stuff. So it was a lot of it was just getting a chance to work with a lot of really, really, really top-notch pros.
How like, as a person who was working there at the time, what was your involvement? Obviously you're a young lawyer, you're out of law school, probably not like sitting first chair, obviously, like what is that experience?
So, you're doing a lot of research and writing. You're doing a lot of, you're taking depositions. So you are getting some sort of, you're not technically on your feet because you're sitting, but the notion of sort of being on your feet as a lawyer is kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I was in court, but it was usually like, no, I wasn't even at the first table. I was at the second table.
Yeah.
I wasn't senior enough to be up there with like the partners, but it was a lot of, I was the one that often preparing the binder for like, okay, here's the script for the cross-examination. Here's how this is going to go. Here's the script for the direct examination. Here's how this deposition is going to go. And then I would go take it. I have come up with, here are our 250 exhibits. Here are all of our objections to all of the other side's exhibits and blah, 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 blah. So you're very much in it, even if you're not the one at the front of the room, and you're getting to really run big chunks of what's often a pretty complex case. So it was awesome training.
If you think about what you took away from those two experiences and going to the AG's office, what were like the big takeaways?
I mean, it was really about you've got to, one of the chapters, one of the rules and then chapters in the book is part of the subtitle starts with, it has to be perfect. And that's a bit of a quote from one of my bosses at the AG's office, but it really holds true for law done at these really highest levels, whether that's the New York AG's office or a law firm like Wilmer Hale. Like, that's the ethos that gets really like driven into you the whole time, is that it has to be perfect.
Yeah.
It is not a universe in which close enough is good enough. Like it is a universe in which perfectionism is not just sort of tolerated as an oddity. It's actually expected of everybody. And the notion that you would put in a bunch of extra work to take that output from being 80 or 90% of what you want to getting it to, you're never going to get to 100, but if you can get it to 98 or 99% of what you were looking to achieve, you're going to put in that extra effort. You're going to pull that extra all-nighter. You're going to add a couple of other people to the team to try to make sure you've got enough bandwidth to get it done, whatever it takes. That mentality is something that I carried with me very much so as I went on with the other stuff that I was doing.
So I want to get to the AG's office next, but I do think that what's interesting with what you're saying, and I've been, paying a lot of attention to the cases against Trump right now, all of them, as much as I can. And what I've found with at least the indictments so far and listening to the cases in Florida and D.C., because those are the ones I think about for the perfect stuff, because the New York one's basically about money at this point, not about guilt.
Correct.
Right. And you tell me if I'm wrong. That's what I mean.
It's mostly about math right now. And there is some work that the AG's office is doing to just put more bricks in the wall for the foundation of the case. But yes, it's mostly about math.
So if you look at what's going on in Florida and in DC, it seems like both those cases, I don't know. I'm not anywhere close to a law expert, even remotely. I took my one law class in grad school, so clearly I know something. But they seem like they've really are in the world of whack-a-mole. They've whacked a lot of the moles down, and there's not many others that they can that the defense really has much of a opportunity with, other than delay and ridiculousness. But you never know. There's unpredictability in those things.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, the problem, the delays then automatically. That opens up the opportunities for other mischief. You don't know what will happen.
Right.
Will a willing witness suddenly decide they don't want to play ball anymore?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. Cheers.
Cheers. We switched to the Michter's toasted rye. Lovely. Neat. And by the time this comes out, obviously we'll know a little bit more
yeah, we're going to know a bit more by then. I think we may by then know the judgment that's going to come from Judge Engoron in this New York fraud case.
Okay, the number you mean, or
yeah,
okay.
His ruling post-trial will cover the number, the amount of restitution, disgorgement that Trump has to pay to the state of New York. That's the next big thing that's going to happen in that matter.
Yeah.
And we'll probably also be, by the time you're hearing this, the second Eugene Carroll trial will have probably begun. That's slated for mid-January. We may know what the Supreme Court is doing on a number of these things, the immunity issue, the disqualification issue.
Right.
Yikes.
So I know they paused stuff in DC because of the immunity thing, but isn't voir dire supposed to start in January?
Yes. And I actually think that I don't know that we know that won't happen.
Okay.
Will they actually go ahead with jury selection? I think that they may, because I think the thing that they could say is, look, this is not about deciding what, maybe there could be the argument that well, if he's actually immune from prosecution because his acts were under the auspices of the office of the president, then the case goes away and thereby we shouldn't be doing jury selection. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if Judge Chutkan takes that approach or not. But yeah, we'll see. I happen to think that both the DC Circuit and SCOTUS are going to act very quickly on that question. And I think that it will not cause a delay in that case, but I may be wrong. The courts have been pretty clear that they're not going to take a ridiculously expansive view of what constitutes a presidential act. And I think it's going to be a very tough argument for Trump to make that trying to stop the verification of the Electoral College vote was a presidential act. He was acting in his capacity as a candidate
right
in that situation, not in his capacity as president. And I think the courts will decide accordingly.
Fair. All right, so let's go back to you get into the New York AG's office. Yep. You're the, was it assistant AG, is that right?
Yeah, that's the term that...
Or an assistant AG.
An assistant AG. That's the term that gets used for the line attorneys, so to speak, in the office, the rank and file.
And when you got there, what were you thrown into cases right away, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I got my first case my first day. It actually turns out to be relevant now for a lot of this Trump stuff, weirdly, but I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. My second day at the office, I got handed the Trump case. And even the Trump thing at first, I was just like, we didn't know if it was going to go anywhere. At the time, it was kind of presented to me as, take a look at this because we don't really know what to make of it. So it was not presented as like, this is the most important case you're ever going to get. It was not that. I got this case and my initial reaction was like, ugh.
I mean, it's going to
check my fantasy football team. Yeah. Like that was my reaction.
Actually, that's so often the case when these like things come about that are going to be life-changing in some way.
It could be.
Like, Trump was obviously Trump, but he wasn't the Trump that we have today.
He was doing all the race baiting crap with the birther stuff. He was already doing that. This is 2011 at this point. I just joined the office. It's October of 2011. But at the same time, it was not like I was sitting there being like, I'm going to go get Trump. Like, no. The first thought I had was to roll my eyes. Like, I can't believe that this happened. Like, he did a university and ripped people off. Oh my God.
I mean, you couldn't believe it happened? Like, this didn't actually happen? Or
I was like, of course he did that.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of. It was just like, because you kind of knew he was a bit, like back then, you knew that there was something a little bit smarmy.
Yeah.
And a little bit like, there was a whiff of con artist about like all of his stuff. You knew he'd been in all these bankruptcies and, he just seemed like he was a carnival barker.
Yeah.
Like that's how you viewed him at that point. And so that was still like Celebrity Apprentice were still going strong. He was,
which by the way was still a con in itself because it
was a con too. Like the whole thing was it was a shtick.
Yeah.
The whole thing was a shtick.
It's like a character.
Like an unsavory character. He was kind of a caricature of himself.
Right.
It's not like any of us sat around being like, oh my God, we're going to get him. Like it was that we didn't hate him either.
Right.
It was just more like, he was more of a buffoon.
A buffoon and like a pain in your ass.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe he did this. Okay, let's see if he actually ripped these people off or if these people just kind of think that it wasn't a good deal.
Yeah.
Like, let's see how bad it was. So that was the attitude going in, was we don't know if there's something here or not. We need to look into it. Like the case was actually kind of like this could be dead, but like spend some time on it and see what you think.
How long did it take before you were like, oh?
Couple weeks. It was a few weeks in.
It was right back.
It was a few weeks in. It was probably after I'd had about 10 or 15 phone calls with people. I was like, wow, this is not like, it was like, 2 or 3 people might be really upset, but just like how bad it was in the level of detail. It's not like I was sitting there being like, why don't you tell me how he ripped you off? Like, it wasn't like I was asking leading questions. Like literally all I had to do was just say, tell me what happened. And the stuff would just come pouring out of them. And sometimes it would come with yelling or tears as well. Like these people were like absolutely like out of their minds about what had happened.
Did that, this is maybe not a fair question to ask, but did that make you more inclined to bring it forward, just knowing how much these people have been hurt?
They had suffered.
Yeah. I don't know, like as a lawyer, I don't know what's that actually affecting.
Of course, I mean, you're only human. Like, it's just like, these people had really...
You apparently have not heard enough lawyer jokes. Sorry.
Yeah, are soulless bastards that we are. And maybe it's why I may or may not be a good fit in the legal profession. But truth be told, like, no, you just hear these people and it was just like, your heart went out for it.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing and it's also the amount had a lot to do with that too, right? A lot of these people, a bunch of them have been ripped off for $1,500, and that's rough. That is bad.
Yeah.
But a lot of them had been ripped off for 10, 15, 25, 35 grand.
Oh my God.
They had spent life savings. They got into crippling credit card debt. People had lost their homes over it. Like, it was rough.
And what were they being offered by Trump University?
They were being offered like a comprehensive mentorship that was supposed to be like 360. Like, we're gonna be with you every step of the way to help you become a real estate investor. That was fundamentally what they were offering.
It's not an accredited university.
No, and not licensed, not accredited, completely unapproved in every which way. And that alone was an illegality. And then there was the fraud on top of the illegality.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but the whole thing was garbage. It was basically a series of bait and switches. And even once you'd paid everything, you had been upsold and upsold. And then you paid the $35K, and it was the Trump Gold Elite program. And you'd done everything that you could possibly do to spend money with them. They couldn't upsell you anymore. And there was still nothing there. You got to that level and there was still nothing there. That got you one day driving around with this mentor to look at properties. By the way, real estate agents do that for free.
Right. Yeah.
Number two is that it was like you could have follow-up calls with this person. They were often pitched on, oh, you'll be able to get me day or night, 24/7 for at least a year longer. I'm there for you. It was carefully metered out as like 6 calls. They were supposed to get off the call as fast as they could.
Right.
So it was very carefully metered out, like what they could get as part of their mentorship. It was like, oh, we'll give you special access to lenders so that you could actually finance these house flipping deals. The list of lenders was Xeroxed from a trade magazine that costs $10 or $7.
I mean,
That was the special list of lenders.
like how long did this take? The whole thing?
The whole thing, the investigation from like really getting it moving to actually bringing the lawsuit was like 2.5 years.
So when did it settle? Or was it?
It settled then a number of years after that. So we brought the case in August of 2013. It settled in November of 2016.
Wow. So here's the thing I'm trying to understand that has nothing to do with Donald Trump, thank goodness, is what compels you after doing such kind of fascinating law work, both in Boston and D.C. and New York, to say, you know what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to take a left turn where everyone else is going right,
And do a startup. My coworkers at the AG's office thought I was absolutely batshit crazy.
Okay.
And told me so. They were not shy about it. They literally said I was like wrecking my career. And part of it was that they wanted to get me to stay, which was a nice feeling.
Right.
I was supposed to be wanted.
Yeah.
I would say that the thing that happened was I did my big law years. I had kind of a reset year where I clerked for a federal judge, which was an awesome experience, but it gave me a chance to kind of take stock, like, well, what do you want to do next? And the things that I wanted to do with my legal background, the 2 things I was the most interested in were, I don't know why, I have some ideas, but like, I don't know precisely. One was government enforcement. And the other one was I'd gotten bit by the bug and was fascinated with the startup. And those were the 2 things that I was the most interested in doing. And I got to do them both, which was great. But basically, I was at the AG's office. A guy that I was friendly with called me up and it initially just kind of wanted me to weigh in on some legal thoughts around this startup idea that he had. But I got really into it, had more conversations with him, and ended up coming aboard as a co-founder.
And so what was Snakt?
So Snakt was we put up a very good fight to kind of be this next generation social video platform. We were basically trying to be TikTok before TikTok existed. And we were doing it with a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of TikTok's money. And so that means that we did well, but we did not become TikTok.
Right.
So
what, like, as you go through the process in your head and the startup world, or startup, running a startup, as you know, is a very kind of a sine wave of things, up and down, up and down.
It is that's exactly right. I called it being strapped to the front of the roller coaster. Every day, and like, oh God, like, it was just terrible. It was like some days it was like, other days it's like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up.
Well,
every day.
Break me down the best parts, because I mean, you guys had some pretty cool things that happened.
You break the top 50 in the App Store. It's just like you're walking on air. You get a big influencer to, and they were joining our platform and using it, not just talking about it, but using it to get some of those top people to use it and to have that like go berserk. That was just an absolutely amazing feeling. It's just like, the term in the startup world is like, the ultimate test, of course, is like, do the dogs eat the dog food?
Right.
And it was like to have those moments where it's like, oh my God, our features are working as intended. It was just like, like that. It was so cool. Those are such amazing things. Getting more funding, that's always good.
But that's a challenge too.
That's a challenge too, but getting it is like great. You're definitely like walking on air after that. There were a lot of really great moments. I mean, we did a lot of really, really good stuff. We had a great team. It took some time, but eventually we built, put it this way, our devs were always great. The product design eventually got closer to where the devs were. And I think we just got better over time. But we got there and we started generating some really awesome products.
What's your, like, if you got the best thing you guys created or did on the platform, landmark thing that you would be like, this was the best example we're making it work?
When we were able to say, like, okay, we've got a major content creator, YouTube star of Mever, who's then on our platform and posting and then inviting other people to reply to them, and they're going to answer back, and getting like, and then having like, 1,000 people, 1,500 people do a video reply to somebody's post, and then have that creator be able to answer a bunch of those people back, and then have those people even be able to answer each other. We had a really great product that we did a beta of that sadly never went beyond that, but it was really cool while we did it, where we built a separate product with and for a awesome YouTube star named Philip DeFranco, whom I'm guessing some people in the audience know of. He's got the top daily news and opinion show on YouTube still to this day. And we made a product called DeFranco Now with him that just really did awesome for a while. And part of the, I think it would have even done more. We didn't have the resources to take it to the next level, to turn it into an Android product too, where then I think we really could have made some noise and done it in a way that fit and was a win-win for everybody. It's tough. Like, building video tech is really hard and requires a lot of money. And the constant problem with a startup is a chicken and egg thing, where you've got to be able to prove out usership to get the money, but you need the money to build out getting the product out there.
Right.
And we never quite solved that conundrum. And but I think we gave it a good run.
So one of the things I think is always challenging in a startup is, how a team works together.
Yeah.
I think that I've certainly had my fair share. Like my business partner, Charming Robot, had, he left a few years ago. We still remain good friends, but like with amicable, like he left, but like it was the right thing for him to do for our partnership, for our friendship. Even I had my ADC before this, one of our most popular episodes is me and my ex-partner talking through our breakup, which was really challenging. What I noticed, you went from the COO to the CEO. I think you having come into this with no real startup experience. Like, what? That's not a knock.
No,
it's just true.
It's tough. Like, your first startup, it's like the things I didn't know were just massive.
Yeah.
And I hadn't come from another tech company. I hadn't come from another startup.
Yeah.
My co-founder had, but in a different space. He had come from clean energy.
Right.
And so there were lots of things that he knew, but there were lots of challenges that we sort of had to learn as we went. And that's not, people pull that off and still succeed. It definitely raises the challenge profile.
Yeah. So for you guys, and I don't want to go into any details of what your partnership was like, but I do know how challenging that can be as a person when you're in a place where you have to make it happen. That's just it.
Yep.
And I know that is such a tough place to be. It's scary.
Oh, it's scary as hell. I mean, I was really excited. I thought that we finally I thought we were getting kind of an alpha of the product good enough that I felt like I was ready to take the leap and come aboard full time. My co-founder, Gaetan, was at the same time, he was still CTO of a very successful clean energy startup called Curion that he ultimately exited out of. They sold to Veolia, big French energy and utilities giant, for around $350 million. And that deal closed in 2016. And then Gaetan was able to come aboard full time and come in with a lot more funding as well. And we had raised other angel capital on top of that. I jumped aboard in June, July of 2014.
Right.
So we had no money. I was not getting paid. I didn't get paid for most of my time doing all of that. No, it was scary, but it was also really exhilarating. It was just something that I'd always dreamed of doing. And you know, as anybody who's done this knows, the excitement factor, if you really are just obsessed with what you're doing, that carries you through most of the time. And you just get like, you're just all in on your idea. You have to be, because there's going to be enough bad days that you've got to have that there, that you're just completely obsessed with the concept. And for us, that was, how do you make video even more interactive? How do you let people sort of talk back with a video of their own?
Yeah.
And that's still some functionality that I wish were there in other products still to this day. But it's gotten more like that over time. But we were, I think we were on the right path for a lot of things, but we were a little bit early and just a little bit underfunded, and just also the table stakes for doing a new social platform have just gone up so high that now it's like, okay, you want to start a new social platform, huh? There are two that have been successful in the past, like 10 years, really. Oh, so this is a fun story. Twitter almost bought us.
Oh, really?
In 2016, they approached us and they wanted to have us in to talk with their M&A people. But then the problem was that we had a good meeting, but then we never heard from them again. What we realized after the fact was that Twitter was in turmoil. Twitter was in turmoil, but Vine was in turmoil, and that they ultimately had made the decision to shut it down rather than keep building it.
Yeah.
So they weren't going to acquire more startups to fold into Vine. But there was a hot minute there where we almost got bought and plugged into the Vine team.
Man,
that would have been a pretty full outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I loved Vine. I loved Vine still.
It was great.
And still, I still love a lot of those, and still in touch with a number of those Vine stars. Like, we were working with a lot of those folks to bring Snakt into being.
Yeah.
And, it was great working with a lot of those folks. And it was awesome.
And ultimately, when TikTok kind of took over where that began. Or with that.
They occupied that vacuum.
Yeah.
We tried for a hot minute, but, I don't think our product was quite where it needed to be at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right money. You had to have all the stars align, and it's a challenging space.
It is. So I asked you what the best parts about. What were the worst parts? And be honest, because I think it's important to hear that.
That's obviously a hard one.
Of course. But the journey, like you mentioned, you didn't get paid for the whole time. Like, that's a shitty situation.
That's not the best situation, but it was kind of fine. Like, I was able to
do it.
If
you can do it.
I got to be honest. Like, having the legal background was a lot of what made that go. Like, I was able to. Part of what made. So when I made the decision to actually go take the leap and join Snakt full time, it was the thing that really tipped it over was a combination of two things. One was we had an iteration in the product alpha that just bowled us over, where our vision for what that early product was going to be, we actually could do it.
Yeah.
We actually had a much more complicated product back then, where you could take anybody else's video and basically grab it and remix it and make other videos with it.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was really cool, but really too complicated. But it was really cool. And we had an alpha that could do all of that, courtesy of the really awesome devs that we were working with. But it was, the other big thing was that I had, all of a sudden, the light bulb had gone off that I could actually go start my own practice. That's what did it for me, was that I could start my own legal practice. That was what gave me the confidence to say, you know what? I'm going to do Snakt because I'll be fine. And I'll be able to make some money on the side. And I'm not going to be completely detonating my career if I do this and it doesn't work out. I've got something that I can go do. Feeling like I was ready to start that entrepreneurial journey is what made me feel comfortable doing the startup.
So, okay. I only have a few more questions. I know we're trying to land on time. But you just sparked a really interesting point, which is some people, I'm not saying I'm one of them, but some people would say, if you think you have something to fall back on, or you think you can do something on the side, then you shouldn't be a founder.
I know. That's right.
Now, I happen to not agree with this. I believe you can found something, you can build something, and you can do it while doing something else.
So the psychologist and writer Adam Grant has interesting things to say about this. And he cites other research that's been done to say that actually having the side hustle or the hobby or the other big thing that you were really into actually helps you perform better on your quote unquote main thing. Because the way I'm wired is that I've never been great about doing just one thing.
Neither have I.
I've never been very good at that.
Yeah.
And I think the era we're in demands a certain amount of specialization, which makes it challenging to be somebody who wants to be multifarious. But is that actually a word, or is that the whiskey talking? I'm not sure.
I mean, I like that. Let's make it a
We're
word.
gonna go with multifarious.
It's a multifaceted, but
yeah, whatever. The point is that if you are multifaceted, what is the path? And I would say, I hope that the research is right on that point. There isn't conflicting research.
All right.
Right.
But in the end, you did end up starting your own practice.
I did. Well, so I had it back then. So what happened was I started working on Snakt late June of 2014. I started as lawyers call it, I hung out my shingle.
Yeah.
It's a weird term, but that's what they call it.
Sure.
I started my solo legal practice on the side in August of 2014. And that was what helped keep me afloat during a lot of those years in which I was making nothing from Snakt.
I bet.
And then after Snakt, that's been my main thing, is to turn what was then a solo legal practice into my new thing that I've been doing for 2.5 years now, called Main Street Law. And yeah, I mean, I kind of made the decision that both wings of the entrepreneurial journey kind of made sense to me, and that therefore it made sense to jump off the cliff.
What made you decide that Snakt was at its end?
COVID kind of made the decision for us.
That'll do it.
We made the difficult decision by the summer of 2019 to pivot to enterprise and start building what we did into other people's products.
Yep.
We got our first customer and our first revenue in February of 2020, 6 weeks before the lockdowns began. And we were and Dan and I were working together on this. We did the first part of the project, the discovery phase, in February and March. We were supposed to get a second larger payment April 1st. It never came, understandably. And we were in a holding pattern with the client for another 6 months. And we were stuck and we were out of money. And that was, we tried to kind of maybe think of keeping it afloat for a bit longer than that. But it was just clear that we weren't going to get. And we had a second client that was even bigger. Their financing had fallen through. We just, it was very clear kind of by early 21 that it was time to call it and say that we were going to go dormant.
Yeah.
So and then in the meantime, the side hustle was doing well. I had a number of new clients and a lot of work coming in. And by the spring of 21, made the decision to turn that into kind of a bigger legal brand.
Yeah. So, okay. So last little bit, I want to just quickly, between the 2 minutes. One of the things you've done over the past few years, and I don't know exactly when they started for you, but you've really kind of in parallel once again to your law practice, you have you're a very opinionated person when it comes to politics. But what fascinates me about what you do on social media is you are unabashedly you,
right?
Unabashedly opinionated in what I think is the correct way, but I'm not probably, I'm pretty biased in my political leanings, but you don't hold back.
No.
And I think that obviously that's a good thing on social because you're authentic, but it's also, I imagine it's not great in some ways and it's great in some other ways. What can you tell me about building this presence?
Sure.
six-figure, like audience, maybe some of them are bots. I'm not going to say who is or isn't. But you have six-figure audience of people on multiple social engines where you're putting this very blunt assessment of not just Trump, but of I think people on the right and fact-based.
Yeah.
Which is all we love.
Yeah.
Fact-based. Clearly, this is an intentional thing. I mean, this precedes the book.
Yeah.
But it's a gutsy move to do that because of I could see the negative side of that.
So, the thing about the startup then is that I got to work with a lot of the greatest digital content creators on the planet.
Yeah.
And hang out with them and become friends with them. And that was one of the very best parts of that journey. And I also, it turns out, thank God, learned a lot from them because I was able to apply that to finally becoming a content creator in my own right, which I finally had the thought that I carried through and made a real thing in 2021 to say, I'm going to actually do this every day for 6 months, and we're going to see how it goes. This was, I say May, it was Memorial Day weekend in 2021. And I said, I'm going to do it for like 7 months. It was basically, how well can I do by the end of the year?
Yeah.
If I do this every day, if I don't just go on Twitter on the days I'm on TV, but what if I do it every day? And Twitter was the natural place for me to start. I'm a writer even more than I'm anything else in a lot of ways, or that's sort of the medium in which I'm the most comfortable. I think I've become more comfortable on camera, but I'm probably first and foremost comfortable writing.
Yeah.
So it made sense to me. But that's where I started it with. And thankfully, I had learned a lot about what does that process take? What are the habits and rituals you have to follow? What do you have to do mechanically to get out there and reach the biggest audience? How do you test things out and make sure that they're working? How do you analyze your metrics? All of that stuff I learned from being friends with and watching a lot of these other people for whom I'll always be grateful.
What are tell me three things to do.
I mean, one thing that's very good look, a lot of it is, and you can do it in some ways, depending on the platform better than others, that you have to think of things as tests. And a part of the startup, the rest of the startup world taught me this too. Every day you're looking at what you do and you're seeing how it goes, and you're thinking of it as an A/B test, or you're pivoting appropriately. Sometimes you're literally doing that. You're putting 2 tweets out into the wild, and then you're yanking one back if one of them doesn't work.
Yeah.
The Viners used to do that.
Oh yeah, sure.
And that's actually part of where I got it from, was that a lot of the top Viners would post a Vine, and they knew what their metrics were. They knew what they would normally get for a good Vine. And if it didn't hit that within the first minute or two, they'd be like, yoink.
Yep.
And they would pull it back down. A lot of it's just a mentality. Like, you think of it as an experiment. It's not so much that you're thinking, it's like, I need to put this thing out there. It's actually a little bit the opposite. You have to unlearn some of the things you learn from doing a lot of high level. It has to be perfect.
Right.
Because you can't mend it and you can't take it back.
Authenticity is so important on social. You have to
It's different.
be who you are.
But it's also there's the amendability of it.
Yeah.
You can amend social to some degree. It's like you can pull it back, or there's always tomorrow. You're going to do it better post tomorrow. And tech works that way too, because it's like, put it out there.
Yeah.
You can always do another.
You can A/B test, and you can do whatever.
And you can do another release next week.
Yeah.
You're not going to get all the bugs.
The internet is not permanent. It is in some ways, and it isn't in some ways.
But once you do a legal filing, that's it.
Yeah.
You did it, and it's over. And that's a very, very different beast than you can actually change it or iterate on it.
Do you ever get nervous when you post your very opinionated, or not opinion, you're very harsh worded, let's say, post to Instagram and Twitter and whatever?
No, I don't actually get nervous about that. I always want to make sure that I'm getting where my fans want to be, or I want to make sure that I'm delivering for them. That's something I always care about.
Yeah.
Is it, potentially being a little bit too harshly worded to the people that I'm trying to go after or hold to account? No, I don't care about that.
Can you imagine a situation where like you would be able to witness someone, you know, experiencing your content, and how would you deal with that situation?
I mean, put it this way, you kind of almost do when you see the comments, which I usually try to avoid.
Fair.
You know, it's, you're getting their hot take in close to real time. And my take there is I just don't look at them. You know, I don't feed the trolls. I don't look at the troll.
You know what? Like, you know, I just be like, let me shake you like as a person.
I'm not going to do it. I don't, you know, my take is, but there's a joke in there and there's a serious point in there. The other piece to this is I genuinely feel bad for a lot of these people because I think a lot of them have been conned. I think some of them are genuinely trying to do more conning. I think that 99% of the people that are in that kind of Trump land have been conned. And they don't know it yet. In the same way that all of the Trump University people, by the way, and this is really important, the Trump University victims were his super fans.
Right.
These were people who adored him. MAGA didn't exist, but these were people that were, if there had been like a Trump rally that they could have attended to be like, yeah, apprentice, real estate.
Right.
They would have been there. And he ripped them off, took their life savings from them, pushed them into crippling debt, didn't deliver what they said they would, tricked them, fooled them, lied to them. That's what he did to those people. He's doing the same thing to the MAGA people. It's just that most of the MAGA people haven't figured it out yet.
Right.
And I think someday a lot of them will, and it's going to be heartbreaking for them. And so I actually feel for them. I really do. Like, I still oppose them. I'm not going to cut them any slack. I'm not going to stop trying to fight for this country and fight for democracy and fight for the ideals upon which this republic is based. But I do feel bad for these people because they've been taken.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. I know we went a little over time, but I appreciate it.
Fine.
And it was fascinating. I could talk to you like 3 more hours, but
it's good.
But
our livers might not be so happy about
no,
that.
definitely not. This has been amazing. Thank you, Tristan.
Thank you, Dan.
Of course.
That's it for this episode of Story in a Bottle. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review for us in the iTunes store or wherever you listen. I'd like to thank our producers at 1459 Production Management and Charming Robots Eric Bowie for his continued production support.
And of course, I'd like to thank our guest, Tristan Snell, for graciously giving us his time.